Thanks very much, Fergus. Just a quick introduction, and we are delighted for you to join this panel and to have be joined by Patrick Redmond, Marie Fleming and Niall McCormack, representing the minerals, the geotech and the energy sector, which iCRAG are very involved in. The idea is to talk about their experiences, their collaborations that they've had with iCRAG to date, and also how geoscientists can actually play a role in a sustainable society. So just a quick kind of introduction on each of the panelists. So we've got Patrick Redmond. He's a Senior Vice President of Exploration and Geoscience with Copper Mountain Mining Corporation. He has 25 years experience in the international mining industry, working with positions with cobalt and with tech, and he's worked on integrated projects involving artificial intelligence and data science to assist in the discovery of minerals critical to the renewable technology industry. Marie Fleming is a chartered engineer and geologist with ARUP. She's the Global Applied Geology Skills Network lead there, and her expertise is in geology, geophysics and geotechnics. She applied to ground conditions, and she also extends this into environmental considerations for soil and geology. She's on the Geoscience Ireland Steering Committee. She's a visiting lecturer in engineering geology, and Marie volunteers with a wide range of geoscience societies, such as the European Federation of Geologists and Geology for Global Development. And last but not least, we have Niall McCormack. He is the Chief Executive and the co-founder of CausewayGT, a newly established geothermal energy company in Ireland. Niall has worked at 20 years experience in the hydrocarbon and in the global resource sector. He's chair of the Geothermal Association of Ireland, the Board of Renewable Energy Ireland, and the Geothermal Advisory Committee for Northern Ireland. So it's great to have you all here. And I think just based on the impact reports that Murray has just outlined for iCRAG, I think it would be really nice for the attendees to get some insights from yourselves on how you've worked with iCRAG, how you've collaborated in the past and the benefits that that's brought. So maybe you could put that question to Marie and to Patrick.
Thanks, Emer. How are you? Very interesting so far. So I originally got involved with iCRAG1 as part of the Geohazards and Geotechnics spoke, where we undertook a research project funded by the Geological Survey of Ireland on a piece of research in Galway on a project we were working for the Galway City Ring Road, where we encountered a really deep, like 100-meter deep karst feature as part of the project. The research that we undertook was kind of beyond the scope of the project at the time, but it was a really interesting piece of research that will feed into infrastructure considerations going forward in the west of Ireland and will add to the geological record. So we're very lucky to work with NUIG and to work with Brian McCabe there, Tiernan Henry and a number of others in NUIG, and obviously Megan Dolan, the main researcher, produced an amazing piece of work that will be used going forward, both in that particular project, but also a lot of different types of engineering, geology and geotechnical projects in the west of Ireland. But I think that was is a specific piece of research, but I think one of the most pertinent things for me coming out of iCRAG1 was the collaboration across the different universities. Prior to iCRAG, you know, personally, it was a little bit siloed for me. I wasn't quite sure. I sit between geology and engineering, so you know, there tended to be a disconnect sometimes between geology departments and engineering departments. So I think iCRAG1 was really successful in breaking that down, and as somebody who works in a consultancy, which is a very multidisciplinary environment, I need to be able to work with architects, with planners, with other geoscientists, with environmental engineers and civil structural engineers. So I think as a geoscientist, that was probably one of the things that came out of iCRAG that has been really powerful for me, and I look forward to more of it in iCRAG 2.
Great. Excellent. Thank you very much. And Patrick, yourself, a different industry, but
Yeah,
you can maybe share your experience.
for sure. Yeah, different industry. Have been involved with a number of projects through iCRAG. The first one was with Tech Resources. It was a project on the Irish zinc ore field, the Irish Midlands Basin, and it was a collaboration between a number of different companies brought together by iCRAG, and produced a really, I think, amazing piece of work, a 3D model of the Irish Midlands that will support for many years now and facilitate exploration and discovery of additional zinc resources in Ireland. Okay. The second project I was involved with more recently was looking at cobalt from deposits in the Central African copper belt. So a long way from Ireland, but looking at an energy critical metal that right now 70% of it comes out of the copper belt, and understanding how those deposits form is really important to the process of finding more and diversifying the world's supply away from a single belt of production. So yeah, a number of projects. Also a PhD project in Trinity that was looking also at trace elements in porphyry ores, energy critical metals in particular. So it's been a series of collaborations, and they've all been, I think, really impactful.
Yeah, and that topic's coming up all the time about the critical materials. And Niall, I just wanted to ask you, the next session that we're going to go into, we're going to elaborate on iCRAG2 and our move into energy transition research. And I know yourself, you've experienced, like myself, working in the hydrocarbon industry for a long period of time, and have transitioned into renewables. And I just wonder, how you see the future of the energy transition in Ireland, and how can geoscience research play a strong part in that?
Yeah, sure. I suppose Ireland's challenge is a very good microcosm of the world's challenge. So I think when it comes to energy, which is give or take, we're 40% of our greenhouse gases come from heat, 25% come from electricity, the rest come from transport and other like resources. Very similar to the profile of the rest of the planet, very similar to the challenge that the rest of the planet have. So the problems that we look at, start to solve here, are very similar to those problems that are going to be solved around the world. So both we can do it here and export it, or we can do it elsewhere and bring it back. As I looked at this laterally in my career in the resources side, what I started to see was there were primary questions around energy supply. There were secondary questions around, and Pat will hate me calling them secondary questions, around how do we supply the critical elements that we need to make sure that we supply that energy in a sustainable manner. And then there are tertiary questions around how do we sequester, where we can't decarbonize, how do we sequester, and how do we capture and remove from the system the elements that are detrimental to that system. And across that spectrum, there are opportunities, both from not even opportunities, but I would say essential elements of work that need to be done, both short, medium, and long term, to advance our ability, whether that's within wind. I think Marie can talk with an awful lot more eloquence and knowledge on the impact of geosciences on wind, which people may not even sort of think about that role. Certainly on geothermal, where understanding our geothermal resource and then how do we harvest that in a sustainable manner so that we can impact the hard to impact 40%, which is heat, which today is 94% coming from fossil fuels. On the second one, Pat can talk an awful lot more about how does the role that iCRAG plays in that secondary piece, which is how do we make sure that we can find the copper and produce it sustainably, because every electric car has 4 times more copper than an internal combustion engine car, and if you want to replace the couple of billion that are out there today, that's a lot of copper. And a lot of cobalt, and Pat's in copper these days, so I can say that. And then look on the tertiary side, the skill sets that come out of the oil and gas industry are nearly identical skill sets that are needed for carbon capture and storage, for the storage element of that. So I think that the work that iCRAG did in the first few years and built those critical skills up that are about understanding fluid flow in reservoirs, in the subsurface is absolutely critical to our ability to store, either from a carbon capture perspective or from an energy storage perspective, as well as obviously from a geothermal perspective, where I sort of came to the conclusion on a personal level.
Yeah. No, that's great. And I think, this, the idea of the critical minerals being needed and the demand for them, I think is going to be a game changer, I would say, in the geoscience sector. And Patrick, I don't know if you've got some words on that and how it's going to influence the geoscience sector as a whole.
Yeah, I think we all agree that transition to low carbon economy requires large amounts of these energy critical elements and minerals. And the fact is they've become harder to find and actually harder to extract as well. Yeah. So I think geoscience research is fundamental to both of these things. Firstly, on the discovery piece, how to find more. Understanding how ore bodies form will helps us to find more, and then understanding, if you like, the anatomy of ore bodies, these amazing creations of nature where geological processes have concentrated metals into one place in the crust, and then we get to extract them and then to use them. Understanding how ore bodies how they form and how they're put together helps us to better extract them. This is the world of ore body characterization. So if you can improve copper recoveries in a typical ore body from 80% to 85%, it's a big impact, because you're getting more for the the carbon footprint of the mine. So geoscience research, I think, underpins those two endeavors. I'm losing my voice here because I seem to be in the driest hotel room in Princeton. Actually, there are floods outside, but the air conditioning here is really dry.
Yeah, we forgot to say that. No, I was just going to say you're zooming in from Princeton, which we really appreciate. It's extremely early for you as well this morning.
Early, but isn't it interesting? I'm here in Princeton, looking at Copper Mountain's copper mine. Princeton has been subject to extreme flooding. 200-year flood events in the last few weeks, and there are people in this area who were displaced by wildfires earlier in the summer who are now being displaced by floods.
Gosh.
So if you want to see the impact of extreme weather, climate change related extreme weather events, we're looking through it here.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Maria, just to move away, I suppose, from the energy and the raw material side, and just talk about kind of infrastructure and the continued growth of infrastructure. And we've got Project Ireland 2040, and even on the energy side, the offshore and onshore installations. And I know you're very familiar with that from a geotechnical point of view as well. But I wonder as well about the geoscience, what geoscientists can do around the environmental side of that and the environmental impact that that's having.
Yeah, so geoscience has such a huge role to play on that interdependency between the built environment and the natural environment. And every single project all of us are involved in, whether it's a copper mine or whether it's a geothermal well or whether it's a new road, has some impact on the land, soils, geology and hydrogeology and the natural environment around us. And we need to be able, we're all amazing at designing things, but we need to be able to understand what impact that design is going to have, what the life cycle of a project is going to be, what the end of life of a project is going to be, and to make sure that we're feeding into sustainable development, that we're feeding into truly into a circular economy, that we are managing the resources that we are using, we're reusing where we can, and that we are looking ahead, that we're not looking in the short term. We have to be looking at the long term and the life cycle of projects. And I think geoscientists are so well placed to do that. Yeah. So from everything, there's very few projects that don't interact with the ground in some way. I obviously wear a very shallow hat, literally. So I'm so it's all about land, soils, and proper land use and land reclamation and restoration for me. I'm not the deepest of geologists at all, but we all have to have a role to play in that. And I'm really excited about some of the projects potentially that may come out of iCRAG2, and the talent as well that is likely to come out. That's where there's a huge gap as well. You know, we need to be ensuring that we have a diverse workforce coming through at every stage of geoscience.
Absolutely. And I think all these topics that we are discussing, and we've very little time, unfortunately, in this industry panel, but we will be covering them in the breakout sessions, you know, from raw materials to energy transition, geotechnical and geohazard, and then the environmental kind of side of things and impacts on that. And I think one big other area that is becoming, I think, more and more important for geoscientists as well is the society side of things and the society impact. So we have our researchers that are involved and are working alongside our geoscientists to work on stakeholder engagement, public perception, those kind of topics. And I know particularly on the mining side of things, that's a big challenge. Patrick, do you think?
It's a huge challenge. Social license to operate, understanding communities, working with communities to allow extraction to happen is a huge topic and only likely to get bigger. So I really like the way iCRAG now is evolving into that space and looking at the social side as well as the technical geoscience side. I think all the company I work for now and previous companies, we pay a lot of attention to that. So I think that link between technical and society is really important if we're going to continue to have access to the raw materials that we need, because it is a huge challenge. I'd like to reiterate too what Marie said there about people. I didn't mention it earlier, but having iCRAG producing high caliber geoscientists, having the opportunity to work with them on research projects, and then ultimately to hire them to work in industry is a big plus as well. The industry globally, natural resources industry, is facing huge shortages of skilled people, of professionals, all across the world. Yeah. And so being able to hire people out of iCRAG is a huge added benefit for companies that collaborate on projects, and the various companies I've worked for hired quite a few, and they're all doing very well. Good. So it's access to people is a big thing.
Yeah. Niall, do you find as well from an energy geoscience point of view that stakeholder engagement, social license to operate, as we embrace the energy transition, is becoming more and more important for us too?
I mean, absolutely. I think there's no question about the fact that the social license to operate is an essential element. Look, as we look at the energy transition, we're trying to solve for. A lot of people think the energy transition is just about solving for sustainability, but it's really about solving for sustainability, energy security, and energy affordability. It's three things you've got to solve. And with that trilemma, security, each of those have a local element to them, by the way, which means that we're moving away from having facilities that are remote from us in energy to having facilities that are next to us. We're moving away from things that are invisible to us, that we don't have to think about day in, day out, to them being on our doorstep. And that means that the social license to operate has moved from being something that you see it, do they know it's Christmas time, to something about actually this is in your face and it's right in front of you today. And understanding how that works and how we work in the communities is very, very different. And I think we've seen that with wind. And we've seen that with the evolution on how people think about wind in Ireland. And as we look forward on other resources, whatever those resources are, that's fundamental. And the other sort of flip to that is from a corporate perspective, social license to operate. There's also a license. There's license to social license to operate. There's also license to invest, and license to invest is dependent on you being able to operate in a certain manner. So your license to operate, it's dependent on your social license, and it's dependent on how you make those critical decisions as you're deciding what to invest in. And I think we're seeing a massive shift across the globe now in terms of where money is being invested. And that's right, that funnels right from the very top, right the way down to the social license to operate, or am I doing things in a manner that is consistent with how the investor wants their money spent, with the company and how they want it spent. So one of the interactions that I had over the last few years with one of my previous jobs with iCRAG was actually in Restore, where that was the forefront, and it was one of those roles that we thought was kind of unique, because it was one of those places where iCRAG was not just bringing the geosciences together, but it was bringing the geosciences and the social sciences together. It was bringing that as you join those edges, as has already been highlighted by the previous speaker, that's really where I think we will make massive advances. So to me, one of the things that I'm most enthusiastic about, I'm interested in pretty much all of it, but I'm most enthusiastic about it for iCRAG2 is to see that element become one of its own elements that really does drive us to, as scientists and geoscientists, to look at the impact that we have in the world and think a hell of a lot more about it.
Yeah, great. And we have a social scientist, by the way, at each of our breakout sessions later on today. Marie, I'm going to give you the last words because we don't have too long to go. So I see in your bio you're very passionate about promoting the role of geoscience in society, and I just wonder, how can we improve public perception of geoscience in society?
Thanks, Emer. You know I love getting the last word in. So absolutely, we all have a role to play in our communication. We're great at talking to each other as geoscientists, but we need to be talking to other people. We need to be talking to our local government. You need to be getting really involved in whether we're working on a project or whether it's through education or you know, I think unfortunately we live in a world of media sound bites. So we have to be really careful how we communicate, and that the communication is clear and thorough, and that we have a cohesive voice and we're not all telling a different story.
100%. Listen, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us on this panel. Hopefully it's been very insightful. It has been for me anyway. And I just wish we had more time to talk, but we will during the breakouts, and we have a kind of a social platform in the evening as well, that we can continue these fascinating discussions.